Hi, I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes. And this is a little bit confusing because in next week's episode, we're like, it's the last week of September. And then we had to switch the
I
recordings. And
didn't
so
even think about that.
I
Yeah.
thought about that while we were editing. So then we decided to switch release dates to make our Patreon episode make more sense for September.
Yes.
So yeah, I was like, when I was editing the thing, I was like, oh, we're like, it's not even October yet. Ba-da-da. It's the last week of September. It's because things changed between recording and release. So
Yes. Well, at least this one will come out before that one. So we're giving you a heads up that next week, when we
yeah.
say it's September, we recognize that it is not September.
And all of our updates are a little bit old.
Yep. Yeah, that
But
is
it's
true.
fine.
That is true. But
It
we just go with
works.
the flow around here. Sometimes you
Yeah.
gotta backlog an episode and stick a new one in that makes sense for things to line up. And
Yeah.
sorry, my
You just
phone
gotta
just
go with the
buzzed.
flow.
Let me put that on Do Not Disturb. This is a damn work email too at 9 o'clock at night. Rude. So I had a thought the other day.
hmm
So I was listening to the Office Ladies podcast, and this specific episode was probably released like 4 months ago because we all know I'm always very behind on my podcast. I'm getting caught up though, since my daughter's been in preschool for 3 hours a morning.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
getting caught up on my podcast just in time to go on maternity leave and get super behind again because I
hmm
never got caught up from the last time I went on maternity leave 3.5 years ago. So, but I was listening to the Office Ladies podcast, and if you guys don't listen, they'd like to do like deep dives that aren't really related to the show, but are usually pretty entertaining. And they were talking about the Oxford comma. And I was very surprised that neither of them like had a strong opinion about the Oxford comma, because at least Jenna especially seems to me like someone who would have very strong
hmm
opinions about the Oxford comma. And the fact that both of them were like, oh, I don't even know what this is, just kind of blew my mind. But anyway, just wanted to get your all's opinions on the Oxford comma because I am a very
I'm
strong believer in the Oxford comma.
I agree. I'm a believer in the Oxford comma. I know there's certain, I don't know if it's professions or different, there was like APA and all the different
Hmm.
writing styles, whatever. But me personally, I think it's a necessity a lot of times to
Yes.
know, you know, what it is. But I'm a believer.
Yeah,
I couldn't leave
same.
her if I tried. That's how I feel about the Oxford comma.
And if you guys are not familiar, maybe we should clarify because maybe there's some people who are like,
Yeah.
what the hell is an Oxford comma? So if you have a list of at least three items, so you have like this and this and this, do you put a comma before the last and? So if you're like, oh, I'm eating, you know, grapes,
Apple, grapes, and cheese. Would you go
exactly.
apples, comma, grapes, comma, and cheese? The comma after the grapes would be the Oxford comma. Or some people would put apples, comma, grapes, and cheese with no other thing, which
Exactly.
then I'm like, is it like a cheese stuffed grape?
Right? Or you dipping your grapes in nacho cheese? Like that's where my brain goes. Like you need that extra comma to clarify that this is a separate entity. But I did
Yeah.
like Jenna's example with the chicken and waffles because she's like, oh, if you talk about for breakfast, I had, sausage and grapes and chicken and waffles. Like that sentence makes sense because chicken and waffles is a thing. Like that's why
hmm
you need the comma one way or the other, because if you just generally don't use the Oxford comma and don't have it there, then I don't know if you're talking about chicken and waffles or chicken and waffles together as
Yeah.
a meal. Anyway, but yeah, I just wanted to get your all's opinions on the Oxford comma because I will die on that hill. I will
Hmm.
always use an Oxford comma. Um, It's also very tough when you collaborate on work documents with people who don't use the Oxford comma because it's like, well, it's not like wrong, so I can't like correct it. But I'm like,
hmm
no, I will always use an Oxford comma.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. And that's all I had
Well, you
today.
know what? Next week's episode, we banter for way too goddamn long.
We did. We
So
did. That
we
was a
should just go
long
ahead.
episode. I don't even,
Long. It was a long, like, episode. Like, it was almost a two-parter. It almost
uh-huh.
hit the brink of two-parter. And honestly, with how much we fucking talked at the beginning, it probably should have just been one. But It was a long episode, and then we had a
Yeah.
lot of banter. So
Yes, which we had some updates too. But yeah, when you sent me that episode, because I knew it was long, but I wasn't thinking about it being like excessively long. And then you sent it to me and I saw the timestamp and I was like, oh my God, we talked
it
for
was,
that long.
yeah,
And imagine how
we
long
talked
it
for
was
a long
before you had to
time.
cut out all my coffee. So-
It was a very long file.
But yes, you are right. We should just get into this. So our sources for this episode included an Oxygen.com article, an LA Times article, a Washington Post article, and also an episode of Snapped, which was season 30, episode 14. On July 1st, 1997, in Oakland, California, a woman knocked on the door of Monica Joy Boyette's home. She was asking for help, and Monica recognized her as one of the Allman sisters who lived nearby. She had been badly burned and said someone threw something in her window and her house was burning down. So in the 90s, Oakland had a large number of shootings and a lot of drug and gang activity, and there were also a lot of crimes related to drugs, such as homicides and burglaries. So this wasn't a super out of the ordinary situation.
Mm-hmm.
So Stevie Allman and Sarah Mitchell were sisters who grew up in that house with their 7 other siblings. Stevie was 5 years older than Sarah, and they were very close, and many people would often mistake them for twins, especially like as they got older. And their father left when they were young, and Stevie helped her mom take care of her younger siblings. The younger children eventually grew up and left the house, but Stevie stayed there with their mom and worked for a local family business. The company she worked for made utility trucks. Stevie was a very hard worker, a very valued employee. She actually received a $100,000 bonus after 20 years with the company because they wanted to show her their appreciation. So,
In the 90s? That's a
in
lot
the
of
90s.
money.
Yeah, exactly.
Dang, companies don't reward you like they used to.
No.
They just give you a pizza party now.
There's no bonuses, there's no pensions. There's
You get a gift card.
Here's $20 to Amazon. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks.
So Stevie was described as a very sweet person and one of the rocks of this large family. By her 30s, Sarah had 3 children and was divorced, and she had trouble holding down a job and had been in several relationships. They said that she would essentially like meet a man, move her and her children in with him, and then they would break up, and then she would go back to living with Stevie and their mother in this house that they grew up in. So just a lot of back and forth, a lot of moving, new relationships, ending of relationships, etc. So since Stevie worked full-time, Sarah would cook, clean, and take care of the home. So they kind of had this arrangement that was working for everyone. And Sarah's children eventually grew up and moved out of the family home. And when Stevie and Sarah's mother died in 1994, she left the house to her children. And Stevie bought out the other children and became the sole owner of the house, but she did allow Sarah to continue living with her. Stevie was 52 and Sarah was 47 the night of the house fire. So now we're back to this woman's knocking on the door of Monica's house. The woman identified herself as Stevie to the firefighters when they arrived. The house was fully engulfed in flames at that point, and Stevie said that drug dealers had surrounded her house and thrown Molotov cocktails through her window. She had pretty severe burns on her arms and legs, but nothing life-threatening. The burns did cover about 15% of her body, and she did need medical attention immediately. Also, sorry to do this for a couple weeks in a row because we did this a few weeks ago, but trigger warning for animal death here. Stevie and Sarah's 2 dogs did die in the fire as well. So Stevie told firefighters that she had recently started filming drug deals and sex workers in the area and was working with the police in an effort to get rid of crime in her neighborhood. So at this time, the Oakland Police Department was engaged in community policing, and they had asked citizens to be on the lookout for drug activity and to report it to them to make their neighborhood safer. So they're kind of like recruiting citizens to kind of like a neighborhood watch type thing. And they're like, tell us who you're seeing, what you're seeing, so we can help with this. And Stevie said these videos were why drug dealers had come after her. She said one of the men in the videos had already been threatening her and her sister Sarah, and Sarah had recently moved to Nevada with her boyfriend because she was afraid of this man. Stevie also said she recognized one of the men from the videos as one of the men who was throwing the Molotov cocktail into her home. So police asked for Sarah's contact information so that they could reach out to her, but Stevie told them her address book had been destroyed in the fire, so she didn't know it. The news of drug dealers attacking a woman in her house just spread across the city and then eventually the country. The hospital released a statement on Stevie's behalf saying that she was trying to protect her community and she was urging others not to let crime destroy their city. Stevie even got a call from the White House after this, and a lot of people sent in donations. She received a total of 92 checks from strangers for a total of $4,700. So people were
Wow.
very
Yeah.
sympathetic to her situation. The Oakland Police Department Officers Association also planned on donating $500 to help Stevie, I put in quotes, replace her pets, because that was the phrase that they used, which I thought was kind of a weird phrase, but I guess they wanted to give her money to like get new dogs.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, just it was a weird phrase, so I want to specify that was not me saying that. That was the wording that they used. But Stevie quickly became known as a drug crusader who was trying to better her community, and many people looked up to her. California's governor called her a model activist and a hero. The governor of California also offered a $50,000 reward for anyone who came forward with information about this arson. Again, in the 90s, so very substantial award. He released a statement saying, "All of us are sending a message that we will not be prisoners in our own homes, cowering under our windows and behind steel bars. We will stand up for our families, neighborhoods, we will stand up for our families, neighbors, and communities." And it's also funny because I did not use an Oxford comma in that sentence. So I feel the need to point that out.
Wow. She feels so
Which-
strongly about it and didn't even use it.
But you know what? In this sentence where there's a dash dash, that tells me I copied and pasted this. So I did not write that. But you know, it stumbled, it tripped me up because I
Yep. Look at that.
Anyway. So police were under a lot of pressure to solve this case, but none of the drug dealers they spoke to in Oakland would admit to knowing anything about the fire or the videos that Stevie had been filming. Some of the drug dealers they did speak to said that if Stevie had gotten in their way, it would have been easier for them to put a bullet in her head instead of setting her house on fire. So they're like, this isn't really how we handle things. Like, they're like, we don't know anything, but if we did, we wouldn't do it this way.
Yeah, I don't feel like drug deals gone wrong. I think it's very like execution style shot
Yeah.
or just like shoot you. It's not set your house on fire with a Molotov cocktail.
Yeah.
Like, it's not really the thing.
Exactly.
Investigators also thought it was unusual they weren't receiving any information with such a large reward available. Again, remember it was like $50,000 in the 90s. That's a lot of money today, but that was a lot of money back then too.
And especially too because like drug dealers are often kind of like rivals, so there's gonna be word on the street, and so if you know that Joe Schmo over here is the one that did this and you can get a $50,000 reward for ratting him out, I feel like you probably would.
Yeah, probably. So as they started reviewing the arson report, they noticed some inconsistencies with Stevie's story. So the broken glass was found outside the window, not inside, which wouldn't make sense with a Molotov cocktail being thrown into the window from the outside. Then something happened on July 7th that stumped detectives even more. Leota Belleville was one of Sarah and Stevie's sisters, and she filed a missing persons report for Stevie. So police reached out to her being like, Stevie's in the hospital. Like, why are you filing a missing persons report? And she's like, well, that's not Stevie, that's Sarah. So they're like, what? And Leota said Stevie would have never been involved in trying to rid the community of drugs by filming drug dealers. She said she would have looked the other way and wouldn't have wanted to get in the middle of something like that. Because you are putting yourself at a great danger by putting yourself in this position.
Yeah, like it didn't seem like she was trying to say, you know, oh, like she wouldn't have like wanted to get rid of drugs in the community, but more like she's like, that's not my business. I'm not gonna get in the middle of that. I'm just gonna mind my own business in my house over here.
I'm not putting a target on my back. I'm just gonna protect myself.
Yeah.
So when Leota spoke with Sarah, Sarah said she didn't have any insurance, but Stevie did. So she was impersonating Stevie so her insurance would cover her medical bills. Leota asked Sarah where Stevie really was, and at first Sarah said Lake Tahoe, and then she said Reno. And Leota grew concerned about the change in her story, especially because she knew tensions had been high between Stevie and Sarah. So Stevie was frustrated because Sarah was lazy and didn't work or contribute to the house. And Stevie was also considering moving out of Oakland, and Sarah was worried about what would happen to her without Stevie around. Leota said Sarah had also cashed some of Stevie's checks recently. So detectives brought Sarah in and she continued to insist that she was Stevie. She said Leota was just hysterical that night, and they continued questioning Stevie about the night of the fire, and they thought it was unusual that the burns were only on the front of her arms and legs, and that she hadn't been like fully engulfed in the flames and was able to get out of the house. Like, how is only half of your body burnt if you're in this burning house? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, like very convenient that it's only on half of your body.
Yeah. So they asked her for ID, and when she opened her wallet, they saw multiple IDs for both Sarah and Stevie. So they asked her why she had both sets of IDs, and she said she and Sarah both carried each other's IDs around. Which I'm like, how many IDs do you have? I've only
Right.
ever been issued one by the government, but
I just give one to my sister to carry around, just in case she needs
just in
it.
case.
Like,
And especially too, like they're like in their 40s and 50s. It's not like you're like trying to get into bars as underage.
exactly. It's
It's
one thing if
not.
you're like, 18 and 21 and you're like, yeah, I got my sister's ID, but like you're in your 40s and 50s. I don't think you need
Yeah.
that.
So, police took fingerprints and were able to confirm her identity as Sarah Mitchell from a 1970s prostitution conviction and welfare fraud arrest. She was arrested for forgery and providing a false name to the police. An APB was put out for Stevie Allman, and investigators worked on trying to find her. So they discovered that Stevie's bank accounts had been emptied, and surveillance footage from the bank showed Sarah as the one withdrawing the money. On July 15th, they returned to the remains of the home with a warrant to see if they could find any evidence to point towards Stevie's whereabouts. Most items had been destroyed, but a few items had survived the fire, and investigators were horrified to find what looked like an elbow sticking out of a garbage bag in the freezer in the kitchen. So I'm like, that's not on the arson report.
Right? And like you had to go back and find this. This wasn't
Like,
readily
I
evident.
assume with an arson report, someone is in the house. Are they not like, I don't know, maybe you can't open a freezer. I don't know.
Who
But
knows?
so further investigation revealed multiple body parts in the freezer, and the body was confirmed to belong to Stevie. Luminol showed large amounts of blood in Stevie's bedroom, and the tub in the bathroom had skill saw marks on the inside, indicating that's where Stevie had been dismembered. Stevie's autopsy showed that she died from blunt force trauma to the head, likely as many as 20 blows, and her body had been cut into four pieces and stored in the freezer. So again, a very violent death and also a lot of just like mutilating the body afterwards.
Hmm.
So investigators worked on figuring out exactly what had happened between the sisters and when. Someone living in that house had been working with the Oakland Police Department and providing information about drug dealers in the area, but now police didn't know if they had been working with Stevie or Sarah. The women looked a lot alike, and Sarah had also been cashing Stevie's checks, so they're really unsure how long Stevie had actually been dead. So the last confirmed sighting of Stevie was to believe to be in April, but Sarah had cashed Stevie's checks 2 years before that too. So a very muddled timeline here.
Yeah. And especially with her body being found in the freezer, like you
Yeah,
can't get a
you don't
time of
really
death
know.
from that based on decomposition.
Yeah. And especially also like if the house burnt down, I'm assuming after the fire, the freezer is not really getting,
Hmm.
I assume there's not electricity in the house. So then you
Yeah.
had it frozen and then it was also thawing. Like very
Just,
not, you can't get anything from that.
yeah, hard to come to a conclusion.
So fire was also set to the house on June 19th and sometime in May prior to the July 1st fire that burned the whole house down. And in the June 19th fire, no one was hurt and there wasn't a large amount of damage. So how were they able to get a luminol test from her bedroom if the house was completely burnt down? And like the freezer.
I don't think it was completely burnt down. I think it was just mostly burnt down. I don't know.
Just because it says burn the whole house down. So then I was like confused if it was like the structure.
I think I just meant the one that was like the big fire. Like I think there were still like some parts of the house left.
Okay.
I don't.
I was just wondering if they could do like luminol tests and there was like a freezer after the big fire, like what was left. Anyway,
Yeah,
doesn't
I guess
matter.
there were like parts of it that were left after the fire, but like the house was like destroyed, but maybe there were still like sections of
Hmm.
rooms that had stuff. They didn't
Okay.
really specify.
In the June 19th fire, no one was hurt and there wasn't a large amount of damage, and it's unknown if Sarah set both of these fires by herself or if she had help. Or the fires could have actually been set by drug dealers and Sarah murdering Stevie was unrelated. So both could be true. So on July 23rd, 1997, Sarah Mitchell was charged with the murder of Stevie Allman. She went to trial in November of 2000, and the prosecution argued that on June 30th, 1997, Sarah murdered Stevie while she slept in her bedroom by hitting her repeatedly over the head. On November 21st, 2000, Sarah was found guilty of first-degree murder. Her family asked that she be spared the death penalty because they didn't want to lose another sister, so Sarah was sentenced to life in prison. Sarah Mitchell is currently serving her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility for the murder of her sister, Stevie Allman. It's a kind of crazy one, I guess, that they looked. It's like I know me and my sister look alike, but it's crazy to think two sisters can look so much alike that like even police are like, I don't know who I talked to.
Yeah. I guess too, it's like if it's not someone that you're super close to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like obviously people that like know the two of you, like no one would ever like get you confused. But also if like,
Hmm.
you only had met you a few times or like saw you around every now and then you're like, oh, which one was that? Was that this sister or this sister? And
Yeah.
especially because like it seemed like they lived together and like they did a lot of stuff together. And but yeah, just bizarre. I mean, you're killed your sister and pretended to be her and left her body in the freezer.
And for like a reason that we don't fully know. I mean, maybe because
Exactly.
Stevie was thinking of leaving or they were fighting, but like that's not like a valid reason to kill your sister.
Yeah, like there's not like a clear motive. And as far as I could find, like Sarah has never, confessed or given any kind of information that, going back to the previous fires, it's like, oh, was this her trying to like set this up before, or were those just a wild circumstance that was unrelated? And then it's like, okay, so this happened in July, and so that's when her body was found, but she was believed to have been seen in April. So that's at least several months that she could have been dead. But then also maybe it wasn't even her in April because it seems like a lot
Hmm.
of people got them confused. So it's like, I don't know, it's just a bizarre
Yeah.
case. Which I did get the idea from this case from the That's Messed Up SVU podcast. So I know I've talked about them several times on this podcast, but if you haven't been around or have forgotten, they basically cover an episode of Law and Order SVU and then the true crime that it was based off of, and like they have guests and stuff like that. So I was listening to this episode, and then they were talking about this case, and I vividly remember like the episode that was based on this sort of, and but I didn't know the real story, and I was like, oh my God, like what a bizarre story. So that's was the inspiration for this episode. And also a plug for patreon.com/caffeinated crimes if you want to hear us talk about that SVU episode, because that will
Hmm.
be coming out on Thursday of this week.
Yes.
So we're gonna do our own little spin on an SVU recap podcast for a single Patreon episode. So all right, so that being said, Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
I know we really don't have too much banter today. So my perk of the week is what I did this weekend. Oh, sorry, Jacqueline. I forgot what I did this weekend. My perk of the week is we got to go to Dollywood with Millie and have a girls' day.
What did I do this weekend? Oh, I hung out with you. I forgot.
Honestly, it's only Tuesday, but the weekend feels like 5 years away at this point. Like that's another lifetime that I
Uh,
lived over the
Today,
weekend.
someone asked me something at work, and it was related to someone else like being out for the week. And I was gonna be like, oh well, like it's late in the week, so blah blah. And then I was like, wait, it's not late in the week. It is Tuesday
Tuesday.
morning. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
is this possible?
Yeah,
We've lived an entire lifetime since the weekend. I didn't see you both days this weekend though.
that is
But
true. That is true. But the yeah, we went to Dollywood together and it was
yes,
hot. It was fun, but it was
it
so
was
hot when you
hotter than
weren't
we
expecting it to.
expected.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that hot, but it was still a fun day.
Hmm.
I got to ride the elephants and the bear and the carousel, which made me very nauseous. I haven't rode a carousel in a while, and I was like, oh,
It
I get really bad motion sickness.
it felt faster than I was expecting.
And especially because I was on a horse, so I was going up and down too. I was
Yep.
like, kind of felt that way on the elephants too, though. That little creakety elephant kind of freaked me out. I was like,
You're
because when
like,
you let go of the
oh,
button, it was like, boom, it just dropped you.
it
I was like,
it is quite a
oh,
drop up there. Yeah.
but yeah, it was still fun, but it was a fun day. So that is my perk of the week. Jacqueline, what is your perk of the week?
Well, that was also my perk of the week because that was pretty much the only fun thing I did this week. I did a bunch of stuff this week, but because now I
Mm-hmm.
have my daughter in soccer and swim and all these things, so it's very busy now. But that was the fun
No
thing that I
plug for the
did.
book club.
Yeah, book club and
See,
everything
we did
else.
so much this weekend. It's hard to keep
It
up.
was a very yeah, it's been a very eventful week. But no, it was a good time and it was relaxing and that like we didn't there was no like set schedule. It wasn't like a super rush kind of thing. It was just,
Yeah.
hanging out and having a good time and it was very hot, but other than that, it was great. We got two frozen strawberry lemonades
Hmm.
each and they were delicious.
They were very good.
I could go for one of those right now. But no, it was a great time. It was just a fun little girls' day, and thankfully Courtney will ride the rides with my daughter that I cannot ride at 8 months pregnant. So
Yeah, I wouldn't ride the teacups with her though. Sorry, Millie girl. I would have been puking.
yeah, I also that is a dad ride. I also do not ride the teacups. So
Yeah, the teacups, it's rough. They're
yeah.
rough on my weak stomach. So
But I already gave a plug for patreon.com, but I will give another one. Again, that's patreon.com/caffeinated crimes. Um, and again, in 2 days, you can hear us talk about the Law and Order SVU episode that was loosely based on this case. And we also just have other monthly bonus episodes,
mhm.
and you can talk to us on Discord, and we have pins and stickers and just all kinds of fun stuff over there if you want to come support us and hang out with us.
Yeah, we'd really appreciate that. And we'd also appreciate if you give us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that has some kind of rating system. And you can always like and subscribe on YouTube and leave a nice comment there. We always do appreciate that. Just letting us know, your thoughts on the case, or if you have a connection to the case, anything like that. We always love to see your nice comments or interesting comments. But in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.